What's up? This is Dan Fredenberg for FIGGERRIDOUT.com, and today I'm with Howard Berg, who is in the Guinness Book of World Records from 30 years ago and still is the world's fastest reader. I've seen what you do. I had you read through my 32,000 word book. It took you 90 seconds, and it only took that long because the laptop was overheating, and it was still about the speed of about the fastest high-speed printers available out there, or sorry, scanners, I should say, except for like maybe experimental custom units in places like MIT and stuff. Would you say that's fair?
I always 80 pages a minute. I think is pretty fair.
Okay, so there you go. Yeah, that's yeah. So, but just like this is going to get grim in a real rush here, but just like when Garry Kasparov lost to Big Blue, you have no doubt that the machines are able or have already far exceeded the processing time for the same amount of data, right?
I expect them to get exponentially quicker. They're looking at quantum computing now,
Right.
which is really the future. And they'll be able to do 300 years on the supercomputer now in 3 seconds on a quantum computer. And at that point, computers will far exceed humans in terms of their capacity to think and compute. And there are many prominent people like Bill Gates that are saying this threatens the existence of humanity. Because when you think about it, the computer gets smart enough and is doing everything for us. They say every occupation will basically be done by computer in the next 30 years. When in 10 years, 30% of all existing jobs will be done by computer. What happens when the computers say, well, what do they do? Why do we need? Why do we need them? They become the Cylons, and they decide we're a waste of time.
I was actually reading an article. There's a periodical I get through my Kindle. It's called Philosophy Now, and so they have papers from different associate professors or you know, maybe it's their thesis or something like that. But I was reading an article about AI, and they mentioned that there's a cultural difference. In the West, we always think of automation and robots of, hey, they're going to take our jobs, they're going to take our lives, you know, everything. But if you go to, say, Japan, you know, like it's all about optimism and the childishness of an AI, you know, like Astro Boy. You mentioned after the interview that you were actually exposed to like the Eastern maps of mind and meditation. So you're one of the few people that have taken the time to consume vast amounts of scientific findings and data, but also know the power of awareness itself. That makes the machine's vast processing power advantage actually irrelevant. Like, am I way out in left field here by saying that? Because I didn't even warm up for that.
No, actually, intuition, I think, is our greatest ability, our greatest skill. I actually developed a way to teach it. If you'd like, I could go into some of the steps involved in that, because I found a way to communicate with the unconscious mind consciously to draw on its much greater computational ability. The conscious mind is limited to 7 chunks of data at a time, whereas the unconscious mind has unlimited. It's every cell in our body is being guided by the unconscious mind, literally consistently. And so if you'd like, I could actually show you how that works.
Yes, please.
Well, the key comes from Carl Jung. I remember when I was studying psychobiology, I thought Carl Jung was a lunatic. He was into astrology and tarot and numerology. And I'm like, why would an educated man pay so much attention to stuff that most scientists considered nonsense? Well, I studied astrology and tarot and numerology later on, and there was a reason. There's 3 levels of learning: literal, implied, and inferential. That's science. Literal information is what you see. Implied information is what you're expected to
So see, you mean perceptual, right?
Right. If
Okay.
I said the man ate an apple, you won't go, whoa, what's an apple? Well,
Okay.
what's the man? That's implied.
Yeah.
It's implied that you know what an apple is.
Right.
The inferential is like, I get it. I understand it. So I'm going to give you an analogy here. Imagine a circle with a dot in the middle.
Uh-huh.
So literally, what do you see?
Mm-hmm. A boob.
A circle. Well, okay, that's implied. All right, your mind's in a different place than mine is right now.
Oh, it's in multiple places at once, I assure you.
Okay, but I actually can see where that came from.
Right.
But literally, you see a circle with a dot in the middle.
Yeah.
Now, it's actually on the implied level, not what you suggested, although it could be abstractly possible. Might see it that way, but it's actually the symbol of the sun in astronomy. And as I mentioned, astrology also uses it because they were the same thing once. They're not anymore, but they were.
Mm-hmm.
So if you see a circle with a dot in the middle, it's not just a circle with a dot, it's the sun. Now I'm going to tell you it's the meaning of life. Would you like to see how a circle with the dot in the middle becomes the meaning of life?
Yes, please.
Someone like a Buddha would show a flower or a circle with a dot in the middle and say, that's the lesson. And then the disciples would have to, what the hell is he telling us? Here's what it is. A point, there you go. A point is infinitesimally small. Everywhere you look, there's an infinite number of points, but they're invisible. And so it's the symbol of spirit, something that's omnipresent. It's everywhere, but nowhere. You can't see God anywhere, but it fills all time and space. The circle is the symbol of a boundary. Everything in the circle is you. Everything out of the circle is everything that is in you. And what it's saying at the center, everything's one thing, spirit. So we see all these different people and things around us. They all look and seem different. But at the center, it's a singularity. So that's one of the secrets. We're all one thing. Humanity is actually a thing. It's not just a bunch of individuals, but collectively, we're an organism. We function as a unit. And then all the other units around us function as part of that unit. And so it's saying everything is one thing that looks different, acts different, but at the center, it's only one thing. And so that's inferential. How do you get to that? It's through symbols. And so by learning to use symbols, we learn how to communicate with the unconscious consciously. And I'll show you how that works if you'd like. The way the unconscious communicates is that my phone is talking. I'll shut it off.
Yeah, another version of your unconscious.
No, it's taking over. That's an AI.
Yeah.
So I don't understand that. That was kind of interesting that it said that. The unconscious mind doesn't use words. The unconscious mind uses emotions and dreams. So you get a feeling and you say, there's something I should be doing, but I don't remember what it is. And I know it's really important. And if I don't do it, I'm going to have that's the unconscious mind. It communicates through feeling. When you get an epiphany, it's like, aha, and it's a feeling. So how do we communicate those feelings consciously? There's steps you take. The first step, I like to read like 10 books in a few hours to get data. Now, I don't know. I know that data has a solution somewhere to what I'm trying. I don't know what it is, but I know the solution's in that data. So I fill my mind up with the raw data, and then I ask questions that have emotional significance. Let me give an example. You said, Howard, do I need a root canal? I said, Dan, you need 10 root canals. How would you feel? You said, Howard, did I win the lottery? Dan, you won $65 million. You'd probably feel pretty good. So based on the question you're asking, how should you feel? Good or bad if it's a yes. How do you feel? Good or bad? So you're gauging those states, those emotional states with a yes or no. If you ask enough yes and no binary questions, you get some very good specificity. Now, initially, you make some mistakes, like learning to read letters. D and B look so similar when you're a little kid. But over time, you get very intuitive. You begin to understand what those feelings are telling you. And here's the beauty. As you know, the brain is very plastic. When neural pathways are used consistently and coordinated, they develop a superconductivity. They myelinate. And so the unconscious brain, which is essentially your limbic system, your emotional brain, your ancient brain, is starting to work more with the forebrain through this questioning and emotional gauging. Over time, you don't even have to ask the questions because the pathway has become connected and you become intuitive. Genius is seeing what worked and then seeing what's coming next before anyone else.
Right, because they're paying attention to the unconscious there, which is, you see, like, for me, like, when I look for the frustration. If I see a bunch of people frustrated in the same situation, I'll say, it's like, okay, then there's something that needs to be adjusted. What parts of this puzzle can be adjusted? Can the software be adjusted? Can the actual workstation be adjusted? Any of that kind of stuff. That's what's going through my head. So basically, where you were going then is that that adaptation that is a human quality coming from intuition of finding. It's because a computer wouldn't be able to detect a problem the same way. Basically, it has to go off of something that's discovered as a.
It has to use existing data and connect dots, but the intuition seems to go a step further.
Right.
And it can visualize and imagine. Imagination is different than just thinking.
Yes, it is.
I don't think computers have imagination.
Right.
They don't have emotion. One of the reasons, if you look at Star Trek, it actually symbolized 4 levels of human consciousness. The physical was the engineer. He ran the ship, which was a simile for the body. And the doctor was the emotional one. Don't go, Jim, I'm afraid. He was intellectual, but he was very emotional. Spock was pure intellect, but Kirk combined all 3 powers. He understood the ship. He had empathy. He was logical, but he went a step above and he had intuition. And so it really was a simile for 4 levels of human consciousness: of intuition, logic, emotion, pathos, and physical. And so when you watch those shows, watch them again and realize sometimes when there's like a similar show where there's a robot controlling the world, the difference was in one case the emotional leader is finding a solution, and in another one the logical leader is searching for. It's not the same show. It's a different aspect of consciousness coping with the situation. And when you look at it with that different set of glasses on, you'll see the show in a totally different frame of spiritual, emotional, mental, and physical, and how they interact to solve problems.
Yeah, that's good stuff. And that was an amazing answer, because I started off by saying that the power of awareness itself, it makes the machine's vast processing power advantage irrelevant. And I think it's funny because I was like, when I was writing the outline here, I was saying that, like, that makes me sound like Darth Vader talking about the Force in Star Wars, right? I'm really not far off. The scene I'm talking about where he's saying that the power to destroy a planet is irrelevant compared to the power of the Force. And I'm basically saying the same thing about consciousness, as far as, like, any power the machines could possibly have. They're moot because there's no consciousness. So
when many years ago, I was like 1985, I was a yogi on weekends. I spent a lot of time in a yoga ashram. And they told me about astral projection. And I didn't believe it because obviously as a scientist, it made no sense at all. Yeah. But they told me how it's done. And I said, well, I'll do an experiment just to see. I didn't expect anything to happen because it was illogical. My rational brain said, this doesn't work. So I did the meditation. I had a double-blind experiment. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing, so nobody could know. I knew where I was going to go and when I was going to go and who I was going to talk to. That's all I knew. And that's it. And so I watched the clock. It was 2 a.m. and I'm trying to contact this person. Nothing happened, which is what I expected. For about 45 minutes, nothing. Then something very strange happened. My heart started pounding. If you know meditation, it slows down. Your breathing slows down. The opposite. My heart started pounding like I was running in a marathon. I got really light, and I'm in my friend's living room telling them about the experiment at 3 a.m. So I woke up. It seemed really real to me. But I said, you know what? It didn't work. My friend was a aerobics instructor and had to be in class at 8 in the morning. The bedroom was upstairs, and I was downstairs in the living room at 3 in the morning. I said, what's the chances of someone has to be at work at 8 in the morning, being awake, let alone downstairs in the living room? Made no sense. I said, well, it was fun. It was interesting. Nothing happened. That was where I left it. My friend calls me at 9 in the morning, said they had insomnia. They woke up at 2:45 and went in the living room. And I was there like Yoda in Star Wars telling them about my experiment. So I had the same conversation. I had the same location, the same clothes, everything matched. It kind of made me wonder, how could that be? Years later, I was in Huntsville, Alabama, and that's where the Strategic Defense Command was, Star Wars. If you ever watched the X-Files, if you ever wondered, was there really an X-Files? The answer is yes, but it wasn't in the FBI. It was in the military, and the person who did it was Bearden, Colonel Bearden. And he wrote a book called Excalibur Briefing, which is about a lot of that. If you want to read it, it's a very weird book. So I had dinner with Tom Bearden, and he told me a story that no one heard of before. During the 60s, the Russians believed in psi warfare. We did not believe it would work. But what if they were right? We couldn't afford to not at least try. So they put a team of psychics together at the Pentagon. And there's a movie, The Men Who Stared at Goats. It's actually
I saw that one. Yeah, it was like.
And Bearden was in the group, just so you know. And then in that time, a NATO jet with live nukes crashed off the coast of Spain near the Canary Islands. For whatever reason, the black box didn't work. They didn't know where the plane was. They did everything. They did the sweeps. They looked at the radar pictures. Couldn't find the ball. They couldn't find the plane. And then someone said, what about that group of psychics that was doing this experimental work with? Because they had nothing left to do. They couldn't find the plane. They said, why don't we go and tell them what happened? And where's the plane? So these guys are in the basement of the Pentagon meditating, and they found the plane. They found the plane with their minds. So there's more to consciousness than what most people believe. I mean, I personally have seen some amazing things myself, and I was not a believer. I was not a believer. But I kept an open mind, and I tested. Like a scientist, I ran a double-blind experiment, and the other person called me. I did not call them. They called me to ask me what happened, and it happened twice. So it's changed how I perceive consciousness and reality because I have no logical explanation for how else to explain it. It certainly is none of my psych books or bio books could offer even the slightest explanation how something like that could even remotely, until recently. They just discovered a new form of neurotransmission. They severed the connection between axons and dendrites in an organism, and then they did a brain scan, and they found that there was still stimulation going on without the normal mechanism, which was...
so like quantum entanglement or something like that.
Yes, exactly. So my theory is, well, if it can do that within a brain, and they're actually saying quantum entanglement is one of the things they're looking at, why is it limited to one brain? What if it can entangle with another brain for some reason? Which would be a logical explanation for how that can... I actually have a model for that if you might be interested. You ever hear of chimeric cells?
Yeah, but biology is by far my weak point.
Chimeric cells, when you're in your mother's womb, they actually found some of her cells transfer to you when you're developing and become part of you. And that some of the autoimmune diseases people have are from their mother's cells triggering an autoimmune response because they're not part of their real body. And they cause certain diseases. And they also can cure a disease. Like say you're diabetic, but you have some of your mother's cells in your pancreas, it might make you insulin. Well, so you got these chimeric cells. So there are mom cells in your body, and some of your cells went into her body.
Yeah.
What if the cells in your body and the
Yeah.
cells in her body are entangled?
Right.
And that's how moms know what's going on. And there's a mother's intuition is actually based on the transmission of data from chimeric cells with quantum entanglement from one organism to another.
Right, right, and it doesn't necessarily have to be as of a materialistic explanation as that
No,
either.
it
And
doesn't.
one,
I just keep an open mind. I don't believe or disbelieve. I don't know. So I
Mhm,
test and
mhm.
see what happens. You don't know. I mean, so many of the things we have today would have been miraculous 1,000 years ago. Who could, a computer, a television, who, can you imagine in medieval times you showed up at King Arthur's court with a laptop with an HD screen playing a movie? I mean, they would
Yeah,
have, they would have
yeah,
looked at you like, where did this, who, what are you? Where did this
yeah,
come from?
yeah.
So we take it for granted, but what we look at as everyday life would have been magical beyond belief. Merlin could never have done something as miraculous
Right,
as what we
right,
did.
right. Ever since I decided to go into engineering, that was well. I remember when I was a little kid, I used to imagine if I found myself teleported in the past, what could I do to like make a big wave just by me being there, like change the course of history.
Yeah,
And so I'd end up researching the things that would satisfy that, so like you dropped me back then, I'd also start thinking about if the world did collapse, if there was like a real disaster and it just put us back to the dark ages, could I keep my family alive and all that kind of stuff. But that didn't take that long. That didn't even take the 20s to get that ironed out. But so then once I was engineering, it's like, okay, let's really try out the old noodle and let's see if we can't get the world back to where it was, because that's a much more epic endeavor right there.
yeah.
But I don't know. That's part of why I'm
That's where
uploading
learning
myself.
comes in.
Yeah.
That's what I love about what I do. I double and triple people's learning rate.
Hmm.
And all the problems we have, you need information to solve them. So
Hmm.
if you can double or triple or quadruple the amount of information you have available, and you can connect the dots more astutely and be more intuitive and see things a little differently, you start to find solutions nobody had before. And that's my mission as I'm going around the country working with groups, trying to help get this into kids, to schools, so they can learn to think. We're giving them an exploding deficit. There's fires. That the Western US is on fire. The world is going through some incredibly stressful, trying situations. Let's at least empower them with the skills for learning and thinking so they have a chance of surviving, let
Right.
alone thriving in that
Right.
environment. That's really what I've been doing. I don't know everything,
Hmm.
but I know if I can help people who know things I don't know to learn more and understand better and do things I can't do, then I can help be part of the solution, even though I can't personally solve all those problems.
Right, and you solving that particular problem, that's one of the big reasons why I wanted to have you back, is because you're a very huge piece of the puzzle that I don't want to spend a whole lot of time teaching, right? I don't want to be in those actual mechanics, but I think that's because I used to teach English in Taiwan, right?
Oh,
Oh,
cool.
okay. So because of it, yeah, I was in Taiwan for 15 years, and so because of that, like I like helping people with speech impediments or pronunciation issues, just because there are so few people that have that locked. I found teaching out speech impediments. The biggest thing is you have to imitate what the person's doing that's incorrect, and then show what you're doing again that is correct. So you just narrow, like you were talking. My buddy and I, the doctor, we use the term referent to mean what is pointed towards. So both of us, neither of us are colorblind. We both can apprehend blue, but you need to have that ability to apprehend blue to know what's meant by the word. And so you have to either perceive it or find something similar inside your own conceptual map and say, okay, that's what he's pointing towards, but you can't actually point to the same one in each person's head and have any certainty. That's kind of the lock between.
Did you know that's how World War II was won in a large? I'm going to tell you a story based on what you just said that I think you'll find interesting.
Awesome.
You know, during World War II, most of the men were overseas, so they still had to make tanks and planes. They were women, and given at the time, women weren't considered up to the task. I mean, we know today they can, but this is 1940, 1941, 1942. Women building planes and tanks. I mean, it was unthinkable.
Right.
And women had the same attitude. I'm a woman. What do I know about building a tank? Well, they were the only people left to do this. And if they didn't do it, we were going to lose the war. So a man named Malcolm Knowles was given the job of getting the women up to speed. There were terrible accidents going on in the factories because they had no idea how to use the tools they were being given. So he goes to a factory and he's having coffee, and the next table there are two women. And one says to a friend, this is a true story, I don't know how to use a drill press. And he's kind of cringing. That's the problem. And the friend says, it's easy. It's just like the mixing bowl in the kitchen. And when you pull the handle down, instead of going through the dough, it goes through the wood. So, oh, that's the answer, what you just said. Take what you know that's in the ballpark, similar, not identical, similar. And so a kiln was an oven, and a laminator was an iron. And so women were taught the household appliance that corresponded to the tool in the factory, and we won the war. Because once they saw the connection between their familiar patterns that they had mastered and the new pattern they needed to know that was similar, it was that bridge between what we know and what we're learning that makes the new thing happen, just like you described. So that's actually a very good point you made, and that is how learning takes place. When we're learning something unfamiliar, we look for how it relates to something we do know, and we build on that. And as we begin building that database, it expands out and it becomes something familiar.
So we've talked a bunch about being human and consciousness and all that kind of stuff. But computers, if we move over to them, one of the things that's been going through my head recently is they're designed for rote memorization after just one repetition. As an educator, you know the number of repetitions for a person to memorize something can be about 3 to 40 for most people, right?
Yeah,
you know,
depending on the material and the brain.
Right. And you know, occasionally you'll find somebody who can memorize it in one, but it'll only be under very specific circumstances. So from an HR managerial perspective, I think that's one of the things that many people forget is one time is not enough for most people. No. It's got to be at least 3 times. You were taking up guitar when we last spoke. How was that going?
It's coming along well. I can do bar chords, which is a big part of mastering the fretboard.
Right.
And I'm just starting now to play lead. And it's like a totally different instrument when you're playing chords versus playing lead.
Right.
And so I wouldn't consider myself Eric Clapton by any means, but I'm enjoying it because it's a challenge, because it's doing 2 things. One, you're using not just your cognitive ability, but your motor memory, because you have to learn to coordinate those finger movements on both hands with each other, which is a totally different kind of learning than just learning what you're doing. It's an intuitive thing, like typing, where we're in flow, where if you have to think where's the C chord or the D chord, you can't play the instrument. It has to be so quick and so intuitive. So I think it's wonderful as we age to do something like that, because it doesn't just work with the logical brain, but the motor regions, and it wires it up. And I believe as we develop these ancillary skills that have nothing to do with our core competency, it makes us better at our core competency as well. As we draw, suddenly intuitively say, that's something I can use in my actual day-to-day work that I never would have thought. For a good example, in quantum physics, Bohr and Einstein were violinists. They played instruments, and they recognized from what they learned about music, it applied to the vibration of the atom, and they were able to come up with a lot of models from their musical experience, not from their physics experience. There's a
Mm.
good example of a bridge that you would say, what has physics got to do with music?
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
know, two totally unrelated disciplines. No. In fact, one of the things I mentioned when I went to college, you know, you have to take humanities to get a BA, and I'm a science major. Like, why the hell do I want to take art, music, or theater? What's
Mm-hmm.
it going to do?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I took theater.
Mm.
I ended up making $65 million doing a television commercial, which was theater. I understood lighting. I understood positioning. I understood how to script.
Yeah.
And a theater class. What biologist would make $65 million from a theater class? It's often the things we disregarded when we were younger that seemed totally unrelated to anything. They are the things that make us who we are and successful because we've got something no one else has in our niche.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. But I brought that up as an example, like because you've read so many books. I was thinking about some if you could give some examples of subjects that eluded you and required like a lot more reading than you would have liked.
I think for me, it was stuff that would come easy to you.
Hmm.
I had a lot of struggle with the math. I took calculus.
Yeah.
I took advanced algebra, statistics,
Mm-hmm.
and physics. And back then, it's before I expanded my mind. I hadn't started to meditate yet and do things to develop my mind like a muscle.
Mm-hmm.
And I found it very, very challenging. And today, many of the things that like when you look at the orbitals in an atom, they're not like
Right.
little planets going around like they show you in high school.
Right.
So there's clouds. So you got here's
the Vesper theory,
yeah,
and you get the
yeah,
dumbbells, and you get the
like a
little loopy
exactly.
thing, and the
Here's the middle of the atom. You got a dumbbell here. It's a cloud.
Yeah.
There's a dumbbell here. And so if you took a picture of that atom, 99% of the time the electron would be in one of the two clouds, but it's never in between. I'm like, how the hell does that happen? How does it's going from one cloud to the other, but it never goes. You never see it, and it made no sense. Then when I got more intelligent, I realized it's traveling as a wave between the two clouds. So the wave doesn't show up on the scan. Right. It is moving, but it's
so it's actually pivoting around the
around wave, and then it comes in as it's going between particle and wave. But I was very young. I didn't think like that. I had no concept of it. And so I think as I meditated and studied more and developed more things like that, which made, how does that happen? How does it go from here to there and not go from here to there? It's in a different state.
Right. About math and my own thing. One thing about me, and this is a weird thing to share, but I was considering it as you were saying it. But the reason why I want to share it is just in case anybody finds something similar. So I did electrical engineering, and any kind of actual engineering, that means you did a ton of math. Just to even get in, you already know a ton of math. Way more than you'd think is even possible, basically. But one thing I had is because I always thought that I took after my dad, and my dad would always say, oh, I'm not great at math, I'm not great at math. I ended up applying that to myself. So one thing I end up finding is like the more time that I don't do math and I don't have to do arithmetic, like, paying my bills online, I don't have to handle change like I used to. So occasionally I'll find myself reverting back to that perception of myself of, oh, I'm bad at math, when actually I actually did a first year, second semester chemistry exam in engineering without a calculator, and I passed. Okay, so it's like saying that my math is bad. That's not really a fair assessment, but I forget all about that. But that's partly because I moved to Taiwan. As soon as I moved to Taiwan, everything about my old self stopped mattering. And I just, like I ended up forgetting parts of myself or questioning. It's like, Taiwanese people are so nice about how special or smart or great or whatever you are. It's like, was I ever actually any good? Those are some of the thoughts that I had when it was all by myself for too much time. But
You're raising a good point. The
mm,
self-talk is critical in life and success. If you say, why am I a loser? Your brain will tell you why you're a loser. It
right.
won't help you. If you said, how could I be more successful?
Hmm.
That would be a better question. If you're studying like math and say, I'm stupid, I can't do math, your brain is hearing, don't do math.
Hmm.
If
Hmm.
your brain is saying, how can I learn this faster and better? It can do that too. The brain is a computer. The questions you pose are going to give you the answers that you are asking for. So if you ask better questions, you'll get much better answers. Instead of, why do I have to learn this? This is stupid. And I know
Yeah.
everyone's been there in school. This is the stupidest thing I've ever had to learn in my life.
Yeah.
What if you had asked, how can I learn this faster so I can do something else I'd rather be doing? And your brain could have shown you how to get done quicker and moved on to something you would rather have done. So you're completely correct. We're programming ourselves for failure and success by our self-talk.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
become more conscious of what you're running through your mind in your day-to-day inner voice, and see when that inner voice is limiting you unnecessarily. I can't do math. I can't play an instrument. I'm not good with people. Instead, how can I learn math? How can I become more facile with my relationships? The brain can do both things, but it
Hmm.
will only do the thing you're asking it to do.
Right, right. And is that how you chose the like 30,000 books or whatever it was that you've read was based on like what you knew you had to learn, or like how did you choose those?
I'm kind of eclectic.
Uh,
Like most people, if you're a doctor, you read medical books.
right.
You're a lawyer, you read law books. If
Hmm.
you're an architect, you read books on. I like to go outside my comfort zone a lot
Hmm.
because it's the outside. You got to stay in your core area and be very good at something, but it's building outside that periphery. I'll give an example. As a biologist, how much do you study business and marketing?
Hmm.
Zero.
Hmm.
In life, anyone making an income that's substantial has learned something about selling, even
Hmm.
if it's just selling yourself in an interview.
Hmm.
It's or in a relationship. Why would you want to be with me? That's selling. You have to sell yourself. I
Hmm.
would never have thought that when I was a science major. I thought that was like beneath me. Marketing, selling.
Right, right. Like the vanity of many women, that's marketing. It's like learning their angles, doing all that kind of stuff. And I know that men in general, especially young men, we dismiss it as just like, that's just a waste of time, and they're just doing their own thing and all that kind of stuff. But it actually does make a difference, especially if you're on camera. Ding.
Oh, there's a reason they usually show beautiful women driving in a car than people who are like, oh, look at
Average, right?
that. I mean, and more of us look like that than the beautiful people.
Yeah.
But there's something inside our brains that says, she's really pretty. I'll watch this.
Right, right, right,
You know, and
right.
that's just the way the world works, for better or worse. So it's really, really important for us to expand outside that comfort zone, learn things that you normally wouldn't learn, and you might be amazed. You'll pick up bits and pieces, something someone is doing in a totally unrelated field
Hmm.
that you could have done in your field and no one thought of before, and you're the innovator. Like Bezos, he
Hmm.
saw the old model that Sears and J.C. Penney was using, and he said, why don't I put that online?
Hmm.
He
Hmm.
was looking at an old thing that had nothing to do with where the world is today, and he suddenly realized he could take that into the 21st century. There are so many problems we solve because of our hobbies and avocations, and they've given us another layer of skill or insight that other people in our fields or discipline never bothered to go beyond the blinders in that one little area that they're focused on. And those are
Hmm.
the people who've really made the world what it is today.
Yeah,
The
yeah, and
visionaries.
yeah, yeah. It's well, in basically where you're going with that is saying that generalists are what's going to be needed more and more, especially because like if that's the nature of a computer is to specialize, right?
Yeah.
So and they'll always be better at it than us. But oh, go ahead.
My role models growing up, a lot of the kids, they were watching football stars, and my role model was Da Vinci, Galileo,
Mm-hmm.
Benjamin Franklin. Most people, Benjamin Franklin invented the flipper for swimming. He invented central heating. He invented fire insurance. He started the first public hospital. He was a publisher. He was a statesman. He was so many different things. And I looked at that man and it's like, what an incredible human being. All the things that had no relationship. He was all over the map.
Yeah.
He helped write the Constitution.
Yeah.
He was the first postmaster general of the United States.
Right.
Those are the people that I modeled myself after, even as a young child. I just intuitively, I didn't care if someone hit a ball or threw a ball. It's like, that's good. I mean, I'm not knocking the skill. I don't have it, and I think it's wonderful people can do it. But it's like, how's it going to change anything? Whoever wins the World Series this year, well, next year there's a new one. But you take an Einstein or a Newton or a Galileo or a Da Vinci, and you suddenly realize they changed everything. The entire world is a better place that they lived in it. And I said, those are the people who've really impacted our world. And I mean, I'd like to see trading cards with those faces on them. And it's making those more of their role models, because these are people who were the innovators that opened our eyes to the world we live in. And we need more of them, because the problems we have today are even worse. And before I leave, I'll show you how to solve one of the big ones.
Okay.
One of the biggest challenges we have an exploding deficit. We have energy crisis, and we have global warming. What if we could solve them all in 3 minutes?
Okay.
How do you make electricity? You're an engineer. You spin a magnet in a coil of wire, or you spin a coil of wire around a magnet. That's basically electricity, right?
Right. That's AC. Yeah.
There's two ways to spin it. One is water. The water spins it, and that's great when you have it. But let's face it, there isn't. Niagara Falls isn't everywhere in the United States.
Right.
And the other one is steam. You heat it up, and the steam pushes it. And
or wind can do it too.
Yeah. Basically, steam is the big one right now.
Yeah.
Wind is great, but steam is the main one. You're right, though.
Oh, yeah. Nuclear power plants are steam.
Yeah. So I was going to say coal, oil, gas, and nuclear are the heating element. Yeah. Except in Iceland. Iceland is a big volcano.
Yeah.
And they're using the magma in the ground, which is close to the surface, is the heater, which is the Earth's heat. So there's zero greenhouse emissions. Well, great. If the United States was a giant volcano, we could do that too. But there is actually a place in America where that exists, and that's in Yellowstone.
Right.
The super caldera, it's 300 miles of magma, and there's tons of water, lots of lakes. That's why there's geysers and hot springs. What if we made geothermal electrical plants in Yellowstone, and the money came from oil, gas, and nuclear companies and coal? Instead of seeing it as a threat to their future, it's the new future. And it's got to be easier to find magma in Yellowstone than a new giant oil field in a world where they've been looking for so long. And now you have to build the infrastructure. So you take the people from the coal jobs and the jobs that are being displaced, you have them build infrastructure. Now, where is Yellowstone? It's on federal land. So you charge a usage tax for all the kilowatt hours coming off of federal land and put them towards paying the deficit off. So now you have totally green energy. You're putting people back to work. You're not threatening private industry. You're making them partners in it, and you're paying the deficit off. That's intuition. That's what we've been talking about for the last hour. Seeing a way to do what everyone else is doing differently that can make a difference.
Yeah. It's I have one caveat of my own, which is I'm not against nuclear. With the new models, I think they're really nifty. I think they do a great job. Like the ones that Bill Gates is pushing right now, they actually use spent fuel. And then by the time it's done, it's not radioactive anymore. So that checks all the boxes. I remember they said something like they have just using the spent nuclear waste that's
How
available
does
on
that
Earth right
work?
now.
How do you use spent fuel and get it hot enough?
Yeah, it's I know one of the biggest things is that it's smaller, and the thing like floats in a balance, so like it puts itself out automatically just from the half-life. So it's got a dead man switch in just its own deterioration. I don't remember. I remember looking into it when Bill Gates he put out that movie a while ago. And that was basically what the real sad part at the end is like, okay, we had this, it's nailed, like this checks all the boxes. And then Fukushima ended up happening, and then everybody said, nope, we don't want nukes. And it's like, darn. And so basically he's trying to slip that in. He's like, hey, guys, this will work. I swear. It's like, well, he sold me anyway. It's a rough time right now with the second wave seems to be underway right now. And
We'll be gone next week. Don't worry.
yeah, exactly. Right. So I know a lot of people would like to rewind 1 year to when we last spoke on the show, but in all seriousness, it has been awful. And I knew the possibilities of a pandemic, and I started wearing masks in public back in late January. But I was definitely in the same boat as most people as far as being comedically undereducated on the history of pandemics, which I imagine with all the reading you've done in your background in biology, like, were you doing a bunch of face palming the whole time? Or
I've
were
been
you?
reading tons of material on the virus and what it represents and how do you keep yourself safe.
Mm-hmm.
What's the real facts? Because you're not getting good information from the government right now, and they actually admitted that. And just the other day, they deliberately misled us.
Yeah.
I think that it's up to us as individuals to take the time to find out what we need to know. That's why I teach the programs I teach, to give people that power to find what they need in less time so they can stay informed. And today it can literally save your life, because there's no do-overs. Once you got it, you got it. Here's something you may not know. The number dead is terrible. There's no question. But did you know 78% of the infected people have severe heart damage? They did a study on 100 people, and only 10 of them were hospitalized. The other 90 were asymptomatic. So there was only a small number that were actually super sick.
Mm-hmm.
And they studied their hearts. They scanned their hearts, and 78 out of 100, so that means most of them were asymptomatic, had massive myocardial damage from the virus. So if you project that onto the 6 million, there's about 4 million people, many of whom had no symptoms, that have massive neurological and lung damage, heart damage, kidney damage. The numbers are far worse than 200,000 is awful.
Yeah.
But 4 to 5 million people with massive long-term health debilitations that are life-threatening and don't even know it.
Yeah.
That's a whole different piece of problem.
Yeah, and I think it's pretty clear that a lot of people don't remember back in, I think it was March, they actually used an estimate of 200,000. And then they were saying, like, yeah, but it shouldn't get to 200. I know a lot of people are saying about 200,000. Yeah, maybe they shouldn't. Okay. I don't know about other people. I remember them saying that. Okay. And that's the thing that's becoming rarer and rarer.
It's going to be 4 by the
online.
end of the year, 400,000. And they said it could be 600 if they don't use masks and socially distance. Well, why would that happen?
Right. Well, the one thing I keep on noticing is that the countries that handle it better, that are developed, as you like, I know that a developed country, it's a real misnomer now, because basically, like, out of the 192-ish countries on Earth, like, there's probably only maybe 10 that don't have paved roads. From what I understand, it's really not like developed and developing the way that most people think of it. But as far as developed economies, if you want to say that, there's no question that America has been the worst performer. And I'm going like, well, what are the other factors at play? And I keep on coming back to private healthcare. Now, my favorite healthcare system, just so I can say, is the country Taiwan's healthcare system. and they have a partially out of pocket and a partial statutory system. So it's not a one payer system, but it's, you know, it's, so I'm not just towing the Canadian line of, no, the country has to pay for it. It's like it can go very, very
blended.
well.
It's blended.
Yeah, right. And so that's what's been going through my head about that. Taiwan did fantastically well with the virus, and of course, because of China, you almost never hear about it. I like over here, I hear, oh, New Zealand got rid of theirs like 2 or 3 months after Taiwan did, even though Taiwan's right next to China, and they speak Mandarin. They're apparently Taiwanese people employ more Chinese people than there are Taiwanese people. Okay, so it's something to the ratio of like there's like 23 million people in Taiwan, and about they employ about 100 million Chinese.
Do they live there? Do the Chinese that are employed there live in Taiwan?
Yeah. No. So Taiwanese people would open a factory or whatever in China. Yeah, okay. And they'd employ only Chinese people, and but then also you have like there's a big brain drain from Taiwan to China that's going on because they can offer way better money.
Maybe that's why China doesn't attack, because they see an economic advantage in leaving them the way they are.
Like China has all sorts of internal problems. There's no two ways about it. You know, 1.4 billion people. It's like, what a massive undertaking. And they do actually vote. They vote for local, like you'll have an option of like however many local representatives to choose from, and you'll vote for that one. But they only have one party. So it's like, you know, there's a lot of misinformation, just like misinformation in the Middle East. Like, did you know that if you apologize for public theft in Sharia law, then they can't chop off your hand?
No.
Yeah, if you apologize, so you, first of all, you have to be, you know, mentally with it. So you can't be mentally deficient or insane and have your hand chopped off. Yeah, there has to be witnesses. It has to be public, so it can't be a break-in. Okay, and so those are the things that are necessary to have your hand chopped off. But if you don't want your hand chopped off, you have to say you're sorry.
And that's it?
Yeah, and then they'll do something else to you, I'm sure, but they won't chop off your freaking hand, right?
Yeah.
And you know, the devil's in the details, right? There's so much misinformation about this.
It's a lot better to say, I'm sorry, you didn't have no hands. I just wanted to let people know, if they wanted to learn faster and know more, if they go to berglearning.com, Berg Learning, /Rotary. I do a lot of Rotary programs, so I have my Rotary shirt.
Yeah.
And I'll give them the Rotary price. Now, this is a $1,500 program for $197. You go to berglearning.com /Rotary, and then it's a coupon code. Put the coupon Rotary. Otherwise, you pay $1,500. And you'll get reading, writing, memory, and math that'll help you to be able to read 100% to more faster, how to write super fast, how to remember, how to do math super fast. And this is $197 for the $1,500 program. It's a secret backdoor to my program. So it's it's berglearning.com /Rotary, and then use the coupon Rotary. And as a thank you for having me, I'll extend this to your audience.